Welcome to the Data Vault Friday. My name is Julian Brunner. I'm a BI consultant here at Scalefree. And I'm replacing Michael today because he's on his well-deserved vacation. We are running this session every Friday, 11 a.m. Central European Time. And in this session, we're going to answer questions about Data Vault, big data, basically any data-driven topics. You can submit your questions via a form in advance. I will show you the form, the link in the end of the session, or here directly in the chat. Today's topic is about loading historical data. We received a question how to process data if the source system delivers historical data. And note here, historical data also often comes from an archive or from a legacy data warehouse, for example. Therefore, it's quite a common task in data warehousing. And now the question is how to load the data properly, because we have the same load date for the complete history. Do you see my screen actually? I think not, right? Let me share. For this issue, I've created a small example. Here you can see 3 records with the company ID is the business key in this case, company name Scalefree here in Hanover, and the second entry, the company name simply changed, and in the third entry, the street changed, which is basically true because we relocated last year. And as you can see, the load date is the same for every record. It's from yesterday, 8 a.m. in the morning. And on the right side, we have an extracted date, which is coming from the source. So now we have an issue because the load date, as I said, is the same for all records. And since the load date is part of the primary key of the satellite, we would get an primary key violation when we try to load the data into the raw data vault. One could argue to create multi-active satellites out of it. From technical perspective, it would work, but when we try to get the data out, for example, with pit tables, we have a big challenge because theoretically we could have hundreds of entries per business key per load date. So we're going to apply another option. The ultimate goal is to pretend that the historical data was loaded just as the actual data on the day it was generated. For that, we have to set an artificial date for the load date. So again, the load date is set to the date it would have received if the historical data had been loaded in the past. In this case, we use the extracted date here on the right side from the source as a load date. This is an exception to the rule that the load date should not be a source system generated date. So let's see how it will end up in the satellite. Short note here, I left out the hash diff and the record source for easiness. But as you can see, we used only the date part from the extracted date, and the time part we set to midnight. In this way, we are able to distinguish between the historical load and the actual data loads or batches. And now we are able to create the history because each record now has an unique primary key. So the hash key of the business key and the load date timestamp. So it quite looks like as the data warehouse would be in place when the actual data was created. Now, let's talk about a second use case, how to load the historical data if we do not have the extracted date, or is not usable for whatever reason. Also in this case, we still don't use a multi-active satellite. We use another approach, which you can see here in the second solution. Now we have to use the actual load date. So the load date, the date or date timestamp when the data arrived in the staging or in the landing zone. But we're gonna add a millisecond to every record of a business key. In my example, it's a second, but only because I have not enough space here. But yeah, you will have to add the smallest number, which is, for example, a millisecond. That way we ensure the uniqueness of a record, and we have to create it something like history. Also, when we query the data in the end, we can easily use a PID for it. Basically, that's it about how to load historical data. Are there any questions about it? Let me check the chat. Or any other questions related to another topic? It's not the case. No. Then let's move on. So we have our data Dreamland this year again, and on the 10th and 11th of October here in Hanover. It's on site. So last year we had the data Dreamland on site as well. We had a couple of really cool presentations, and we did some fun activities also in the evening. We went to the night watch. We had a night watch tour. We went to beer tasting, craft beer tasting, and I think next on Data Dreamland 2023 will be great again. Oh, here's one question. How you can preserve history, load date, timestamp. What did you mean exactly? Can you quite give an example what you mean? Okay, now you should able to talk.
Hello?
Yes, I can hear you.
The question is, went into the loading history data from, for example, another data warehouse where the history is also stored in a historic way. So we know timestamps, time slices when something happened. And in your case, LTDTC was overwritten, as I understood, with this loading, but I don't see is it possible to keep the original LDTC from the, for example, old data warehouse?
Yes, sure. Yeah, if you have the LDTC loaded timestamp from example from a legacy data warehouse, you can use this one, of course. In my example, was a question from which we received was that the source system generated or delivered complete history, which had the extracted date in place. So that's why I use this example. But if you have a legacy data warehouse, for example, where you have the load date already, you can of course use this one for the load date timestamp in the for data vault. Yeah.
Is there any guideline how to name? This is LTDTC is the standard for data vault, and if we are copying from one data vault into another, for example, is there any standard how to name old DLTC, or we just name it old or something like this? Thank you for your answers. Bye.
So do you mean if you wanna just move or to distinguish between the old load date from the old data warehouse, distinguish with the one in the new data vault?
Yes. Is there any name convention for preserving old conventions, name conventions?
So what you could do is to also store the old load date, for example, in the satellite in a descriptive field, but you will in the end use the old load date for the actual load date timestamp in Data Vault, and you don't have to rename it or anything else. But what I would do is to extract only the date part and not the timestamp part, so you're able to distinguish which data was coming from the legacy data warehouse. But yeah, in the end, we are using LDTS internally. But yeah, I've seen projects where it's called load_date or load TS, for example. Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome. Any other questions? So seems not. So let me go finish my slides. Yeah, so if you have any further questions, you could use this form, sfr.e/DataVault-Friday, to submit your questions. And yeah, thanks for coming. I wish you a nice weekend and see you hopefully next Friday. Bye-bye.
Thanks for joining today. If you'd like to discuss this further, give us a call on the number below here, and we're happy to discuss this with you. See you next time. Have a nice weekend. Bye-bye.